It was just another ordinary day at the office, or so everyone thought. The employees were busy with their daily tasks, emails to answer, phone calls to make, meetings to attend. The office hummed with the usual sounds of keyboards clicking and printers whirring. But today, something was different. A new hire had arrived. No one had been told much about him. He was a mystery. A young man in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase that looked too expensive for someone just starting out. His shoes were polished to perfection, reflecting the bright office lights. He walked into the building like he owned the place, his expression calm, yet there was something about him that made everyone stop and stare for a second. The new hire didn't seem nervous at all. While others fumbled around, trying to figure out where to sit or who to talk to, he walked straight to his assigned desk with purpose. The first thing that crossed the minds of the employees was, who is this guy? He definitely didn't look like someone who would blend in with the rest of them. Maybe he's just a temp, whispered Sarah, one of the junior employees, to her colleague. He doesn't seem like he belongs here. Oh, he looks too serious, replied Jake, another employee, his eyes still on the newcomer. Probably doesn't even know how to make coffee right. The office was full of gossip, but the new hire didn't seem to notice. He sat quietly at his desk, placing his briefcase carefully next to him, his eyes scanning the computer screen with precision. The people around him continued to talk about him in hushed voices. Some were curious, some were judgmental, and others were simply too busy to care. But the whispers didn't stop. It wasn't long before the senior employees took notice of the new hire. Among them was Mr. Thompson, a man known for his sharp wit and quick judgments. He had seen many newcomers over the years, but something about this one made him pause. The new hire had sat there for an hour, not interacting with anyone, not even answering the phone that rang on his desk. Most employees would have panicked or tried to ask questions, but not him. He simply looked at the phone as it rang and then let it stop on its own. Is he ignoring the phone? Mr. Thompson asked, frowning. That's not how we do things here. He walked over to the new hire's desk, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson said with a slight grin. Are you lost? The phones tend to ring pretty often around here. The new hire looked up, meeting Mr. Thompson's eyes with a calm gaze. There was no sign of nervousness, no hint of uncertainty. Instead, there was only quiet confidence. I'm not lost, sir, the new hire replied smoothly. I just like to observe before jumping into anything. Mr. Thompson blinked. Observe. Most people would have been too scared to say something like that to him. But there was something about the new hire's tone that made him pause. Well, make sure you don't observe too much, Mr. Thompson said with a chuckle. You've got work to do here, like everyone else. The new hire nodded politely but said nothing more. As Mr. Thompson walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had expected the new hire to stumble through his first day, to make mistakes. But this guy, he seemed almost too perfect. As the day went on, the office atmosphere shifted. Employees began to notice that the new hire wasn't just sitting quietly. He was getting things done. His work was precise, efficient, and above all, fast. His attention to detail was impressive, far more than anyone would have expected from someone who had just walked in the door. By the time the clock hit 4:00 p.m., the new hire had finished an entire project that usually took a team of people to complete. He handed it over to the supervisor without breaking a sweat. Wow, said Lisa, one of the younger employees, who had been observing from a distance. He's quick, isn't he? You have no idea, Jake replied, his voice filled with disbelief. I can't believe he finished that so fast. And it's perfect. But even as the new hire's work stood out, something didn't sit right with the others. They had been around long enough to know when something wasn't quite right. Who is he really? Sarah asked in a low voice. No idea, Jake answered, but I'm starting to think we're dealing with someone way out of our league. As the end of the workday approached, the new hire packed up his things. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't acting nervous or eager to leave. He simply stood up, straightened his suit, and left the office as quietly as he had entered. But this time, the employees didn't just let it go. The question swirled in their minds. Was he really just another new employee, or was he someone far more important? No one could answer that, but as they watched him walk out of the office, each person felt a strange unease settle in their chest. It was as if they had missed something big. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The next morning, the office was filled with whispers. The new hire had left early the previous day, but his performance had left everyone stunned. Some still couldn't wrap their minds around how quickly he had completed a task that normally required a team. Others wondered if he had been working with an inside connection, or if he was just incredibly lucky. But no one could deny the fact that he was good. Too good. As the employees made their way into the office, they noticed a change in the atmosphere. The usual hum of the office felt quieter, as if everyone was waiting for something. Then it happened. The boss, Mr. Foster, the one who ran the company, walked into the office. It wasn't unusual for him to make surprise visits from time to time. But today, something about his presence felt different. The usual confidence he exuded was tinged with unease, and he walked past everyone without making eye contact, his steps quick and deliberate. There was a strange tension in the air, and it wasn't just because of his sudden arrival. The employees knew that whenever Mr. Foster made an unexpected visit, something important was happening. The rumors had already begun to spread. The new hire was somehow connected to the higher-ups, but no one had expected the truth to unfold so quickly. Then, to everyone's surprise, the boss walked straight into the back office where the new hire was sitting. The door closed behind them, leaving the rest of the office in complete silence. The employees watched, their curiosity growing by the second. Some whispered, trying to guess what was happening behind the closed door. "Do you think they're discussing the project?" Sarah asked, but there was a nervous edge to her voice. "I don't know," Jake replied, frowning. "It seems different. The boss never goes in there like that. Maybe there's something more going on." Minutes passed. No one could concentrate on their work. The hum of conversation had stopped completely. Everyone in the office had their eyes fixed on the door. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards, but even that was quieter than usual. No one was in the mood to work. All they could do was wait. And then, as suddenly as he had walked in, the boss emerged from the back office. He didn't look at anyone as he walked toward the elevator. His face was unreadable, but the employees couldn't shake the feeling that something big had just happened. As the elevator doors closed, there was a brief moment of silence before someone spoke up. "That was strange," Lisa said, her voice low. "What do you think they were talking about?" "I have no idea," Jake replied, still watching the elevator. "But it can't be good. I've never seen the boss look that off." Everyone was too focused on the recent events to notice the new hire standing in the doorway of the back office. He was calm, as always, but there was a subtle change in his demeanor. His posture was relaxed, yet there was a quiet confidence in the way he stood, as if he had just seen something that confirmed everything he had already known. Without a word, the new hire walked back to his desk. He didn't need to say anything. He didn't need to explain himself. His actions spoke louder than any words could. He wasn't just the new guy. He wasn't just another office worker. He was different. The day continued, but the air was thick with tension. The employees tried to focus on their work, but the thoughts of what had just happened lingered. What had the boss and the new hire been discussing? Why had the boss seemed so uneasy? It wasn't long before the employees began to notice that the new hire wasn't acting like one of them. While they were still trying to wrap their heads around the situation, he seemed completely unaffected by the awkwardness in the office. In fact, he was more focused than ever. Sarah, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, walked over to his desk. She had been watching him all day, and something about him still didn't sit right with her. She had to know who he really was. "Excuse me," Sarah said, trying to sound casual. "I was wondering if you were new to this office, or if you've worked here before." The new hire looked up at her, his expression calm but slightly amused. "No, this is my first day here," he said smoothly. "But I've been following the company's progress for some time." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than he was letting on. He was too calm, too composed for someone who was just starting out. And the way he answered, there was an underlying confidence in his voice, something that didn't match the typical new hire persona. "Well," Sarah said, forcing a smile, "it's nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll be working together soon." The new hire smiled back, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Indeed," he replied simply. As Sarah walked away, she couldn't help but wonder, who was this man? And why did it feel like she was looking at someone who was already in control of everything around her? The days following the mysterious encounter in the back office passed slowly, but something had undeniably shifted in the atmosphere of the office. The employees, once casually gossiping about the new hire, were now more wary. It was as though they could feel a change in the air, an unspoken tension that clung to the walls. The new hire, however, seemed untouched by it all. He came in every morning with the same calm, unbothered attitude, never showing the slightest hint of discomfort. His work ethic was beyond impressive, and he continued to finish tasks faster than anyone thought possible. His efficiency was unmatched, and the quality of his work was consistently flawless. Despite this, there was still something unsettling about him. His silence, his lack of interaction with the rest of the office, the way he carried himself, so composed, yet so distant. It was as though he was here, but not really here. The more time passed, the more the employees became aware of how little they truly knew about him. On the fourth day after his arrival, something unexpected happened. The office was unusually quiet, with everyone working hard to meet their deadlines. Just as everyone settled into their routines, the door to the back office opened. It was Mr. Foster, the boss. But this time, he wasn't alone. With him was a man none of the employees had seen before. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a commanding presence. His sharp suit was tailored perfectly, and his confident stride demanded attention the moment he entered the room. The man didn't speak right away. He simply stood at the front of the office, scanning the room with an air of authority. He seemed to be evaluating everyone, as though sizing them up. The tension in the office was palpable. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Foster said, breaking the silence. His voice was different today, almost subdued. "We have an important guest with us today. Please welcome Mr. Eric Stone, our new senior executive." The employees exchanged confused looks. Senior executive. No one had been informed of such a position. In fact, no one had ever heard of a man named Eric Stone in connection with the company. The new hire, who had been sitting quietly at his desk, didn't look up at the announcement. He didn't seem surprised by the arrival of Mr. Stone or Mr. Foster. He remained in his seat, his eyes fixed on his screen. But the others couldn't help but watch him, wondering if there was more to this than met the eye. Mr. Stone stepped forward, his sharp gaze locking onto the employees around the room. His presence was intimidating, yet oddly magnetic. The employees couldn't take their eyes off him. The moment he spoke, it was clear he had a commanding presence. "I've been watching this company for a while now," Mr. Stone began, his voice deep and steady. "And I've seen the potential for great things. But to achieve that potential, changes need to be made. Changes that I believe will propel us to the next level." As Mr. Stone spoke, the employees felt an unease creeping in. They couldn't put their finger on it, but something about the way he spoke felt rehearsed, almost calculated. They were all eager to know what was coming next, but no one dared to interrupt. "And with that," Mr. Stone continued, "I'll be taking on a leadership role here at the company. Mr. Foster will be transitioning to a more advisory position. I'll be working closely with the team to implement new strategies, and I expect nothing less than excellence from everyone here." The announcement was a shock to everyone in the room. Mr. Foster had always been the boss. He had built this company from the ground up, and now he was stepping aside. The employees exchanged confused looks, unsure of how to react. But the most surprising part was yet to come. "Also," Mr. Stone said, his voice taking on a slightly more personal tone, "I'd like to introduce you to someone who will be working with me closely. He'll be helping me lead this company into its next phase. Please welcome the new CEO of this company." The word hung in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. CEO. The new hire, the quiet man who had only just arrived days ago, was being introduced as the new CEO. The employees couldn't believe it. This man, the same one who had been silently working at his desk, barely speaking to anyone, was suddenly the CEO. It didn't make sense. The new hire, now revealed as the CEO, stood up. His movements were calm, measured. As he stood in front of the room, there was no sign of hesitation in his eyes. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't seem surprised. In fact, he looked completely at ease, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. The room fell completely silent. The employees stared at him, their eyes wide with shock. "I know this is unexpected," the new CEO began, his voice steady and calm. "But I assure you, this decision was made with the company's best interests in mind. I'm here to help this company grow and thrive. And I believe we have a bright future ahead of us." He didn't give the employees much time to react before he turned to Mr. Foster. "Thank you, Mr. Foster, for your years of service," the new CEO said. "I'll be relying on your expertise as we transition into this new phase." Mr. Foster, who had been standing in the background, nodded but said nothing. The employees couldn't understand it. How had everything changed so quickly? They had barely known the new hire, and now he was in charge of everything. The shock continued to reverberate throughout the office long after the meeting had ended. The employees were left stunned, struggling to process what had just happened. "I can't believe it," Sarah whispered to Jake as they walked toward the break room. "He's the CEO, the same guy we were all talking about behind his back." "I don't know what to think," Jake replied, his voice filled with disbelief. "This is insane. He's been here for, what, 4 days, and now he's the boss." They both stood there, unsure of how to react. The new CEO was a mystery, someone who had completely turned their world upside down in a matter of days. And now, they had no choice but to work under him. But as the employees returned to their desks, they couldn't help but wonder, what kind of leader was he? And more importantly, who was he really? The new CEO had just dropped a bombshell, and the office would never be the same again. The days after the announcement were nothing short of chaotic. The news of the new CEO's appointment had shaken the office to its core. While some employees tried to remain professional, others were still reeling from the shock. The quiet, reserved new hire who had arrived just days ago was now at the helm of the entire company. It didn't seem real. The new CEO, Eric Stone, continued to work like he had from the very beginning, focused, calm, and seemingly indifferent to the storm he had caused. His presence was magnetic, and his quiet confidence was something that no one could ignore. But what unsettled the employees the most was the fact that he had not given any explanation for his sudden rise to power. No one knew where he had come from, or how he had secured the CEO position so quickly. All they knew was that he was now in charge, and his authority was absolute. The first few days after the announcement were filled with quiet tension. The office had become a strange mix of uneasy curiosity and simmering resentment. Employees whispered behind closed doors, trying to make sense of what had happened. Some were impressed by the new CEO's apparent ability to take charge, while others felt like they had been blindsided. Lisa, who had been one of the more vocal employees before the changes, was having a hard time processing everything. She had never been particularly fond of the new hire, And now that he was in charge, she found it difficult to accept the fact that he had replaced Mr. Foster, the man who had built the company from the ground up. To her, it felt like a betrayal. "I just don't get it," Lisa said, shaking her head as she sipped her coffee in the break room. "How did someone like him get this position? He's been here for what, a week?" "I don't know," Jake replied, his voice cautious. "It's weird, right? But we got to follow his lead now. He's the CEO. I don't think we have much of a choice." "I guess you're right," Lisa said, though her voice was thick with frustration. "But I don't trust him. Not at all." The tension only deepened as the days wore on. The new CEO seemed to have a strange aura about him. It wasn't just his authority that made him stand out. It was the way he carried himself. There was something almost predatory in his calmness. It was as though he was always several steps ahead, always calculating, always watching. He had already begun making changes. The first major shift was the restructuring of the company's departments. The old ways of doing things, the systems that had worked for years, were suddenly outdated. The new CEO brought in his own methods, his own team of advisors who had never been seen in the office before. While some employees tried to adapt, others felt alienated. The changes were swift and uncompromising. Projects that had been in the works for months were suddenly abandoned, replaced with new initiatives that no one had prepared for. It felt like the entire company was being turned upside down. Despite the upheaval, the new CEO continued to work with the same quiet efficiency. He didn't speak much to the employees, but when he did, his words were sharp and decisive. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, and he didn't seem interested in making friends. He simply did his job, and did it well. One morning, after a particularly grueling meeting with the senior management team, Eric Stone walked into the break room, where a small group of employees was huddled together. His sudden appearance sent a chill through the room, but he didn't seem to notice. He simply walked to the coffee machine and began making himself a cup. "I heard a lot of whispers around here," Eric said, his voice steady but cold. "People questioning the decisions I've made. People wondering why I'm here." The employees went silent, their eyes fixed on him. No one dared to speak. "I'll tell you this," Eric continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I didn't come here to make friends. I didn't come here to coddle anyone. I came here to run this company, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we succeed." There was an eerie finality to his words. The employees exchanged nervous glances. They knew this man wasn't just here to fill a position. He was here to take control. As the weeks went by, the employees began to realize that the new CEO was not like the leaders they had worked with in the past. Mr. Foster, though strict at times, had always made an effort to connect with his team. He had been approachable, even if his focus had always been on the company's growth. Eric, on the other hand, was a different breed altogether. He didn't care about relationships or building a company culture. He cared only about results. But it was more than just his cold demeanor that unsettled the employees. It was the way he moved through the office. It was as though he could sense everything. He knew who was struggling, who was slacking off, and who was trying to manipulate the system. His presence was like a shadow, always watching, always waiting for someone to slip up. Lisa, still frustrated by the changes, tried to speak out during a meeting one afternoon. She had grown tired of the constant restructuring and the lack of clarity in Eric's decisions. She felt like the company was being ripped apart, and she wanted answers. "Mr. Stone," Lisa said, raising her hand, "I think we need to talk about the direction this company is heading. The constant changes are making it difficult for everyone to keep up." The room fell silent. Eric Stone turned his gaze toward her, and for a brief moment, Lisa regretted speaking up. There was a coldness in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. "I don't have time for complaints, Lisa," Eric said, his voice smooth but cutting. "If you can't keep up, then perhaps this company isn't the right place for you. I'm here to build a team of people who can adapt, who can work under pressure. If you're not up for that, then you're free to leave." The words hit Lisa like a slap in the face. She opened her mouth to respond but thought better of it. She could feel the eyes of the entire room on her. No one spoke up in her defense. They had all learned the hard way. Eric Stone didn't tolerate weakness. The company was now in full swing under Eric Stone's leadership, but the tension in the office had reached an all-time high. The once vibrant and collaborative atmosphere had been replaced by a sense of unease. Employees walked the halls with their heads down, working hard, but feeling the weight of Eric's presence hanging over them. Eric had made sweeping changes. Teams were restructured, budgets reallocated, and new processes were put into place. While some of the changes had shown early signs of success, others had left the employees feeling disoriented and frustrated. It was clear that Eric Stone was no ordinary CEO. He wasn't afraid to make hard decisions, and that meant upsetting a lot of people along the way. It wasn't just the employees who were feeling the strain. Eric's relationship with Mr. Foster had become increasingly strained. The founder of the company, who had once been revered as a mentor and father figure by many in the office, was now a shadow of his former self. Eric had made it clear from the beginning that he didn't need Mr. Foster's guidance. He had his own vision, and he was determined to see it through. Mr. Foster, though he had agreed to step back, didn't take kindly to the way Eric had taken control so abruptly. He had built this company from the ground up, and now, in his old age, he was being sidelined by a man he barely knew. The two men had many private discussions in Eric's office, but no one knew exactly what was being said behind closed doors. All the employees could see were the results, the silence from the once vibrant leader of the company. One afternoon, the tension finally came to a head. Eric had called for a meeting with all the senior staff. Everyone was on edge as they sat in the conference room, waiting for him to arrive. His meetings were usually precise, and his expectations were always high. But this time, there was something different in the air, something that made the employees uneasy. The door to the conference room opened, and Eric stepped in. His usual calm, collected demeanor was still present, but today there was a certain intensity in his eyes. He walked to the front of the room, pausing for a moment before he addressed the group. "Today, we're going to talk about something important," Eric said, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "We're at a crossroads. The direction we're heading in isn't just about profits. It's about something bigger, about leadership, about who has the power to shape this company's future." The employees exchanged wary glances. No one spoke, but everyone could feel the electricity in the air. They all knew something big was coming. "I've seen the way some of you are looking at me," Eric continued, his eyes scanning the room. "I've seen the whispers, the doubts. And I understand. You don't like the changes I've made. You don't like how quickly I've taken control. But that's how it works. A leader doesn't hesitate. A leader doesn't wait for permission. A leader makes decisions, and they make them fast." There was a heavy pause. The employees were holding their breath, unsure of what would come next. Lisa, who had been particularly vocal about her displeasure with Eric's leadership, sat with her arms crossed, glaring at him from across the room. Eric's gaze shifted toward her. "Lisa," he said, his voice icy, "you've been the loudest critic of my leadership. I respect your passion, but let's be clear. If you can't adapt, then you won't last here. This isn't a company for those who want to hold on to the past. It's a company for those who are willing to move forward." Lisa's face flushed with anger, but she stayed silent. Everyone in the room knew she had been feeling increasingly alienated since the changes had begun. She had tried to speak out against Eric's decisions, but each time she did, she was met with a wall of cold indifference. "You can either get with the program, or you can leave," Eric finished, his tone final. "But know this. I will not tolerate anything less than full commitment from everyone here. If you're not on board, then I'm not going to waste my time trying to convince you." The room was dead silent. No one moved, no one spoke. The tension was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Lisa opened her mouth to say something, But Eric silenced her with a single, sharp look. And then, as quickly as it had started, the meeting was over. The employees were dismissed, but the unease lingered. No one had expected Eric to come down so hard on them. It felt like the atmosphere had shifted from one of uncertainty to one of fear. The tension in the office had become unbearable. What had started as whispers behind closed doors had now exploded into open rebellion. Eric Stone had transformed the company, but not without leaving a trail of destruction. The employees were divided. Some had fallen in line with his vision, while others, led by Lisa, had begun to organize. They were no longer just dissatisfied. They were determined to take action. It had been weeks since the fateful meeting where Eric had laid down the law. Since then, things had only escalated. Lisa and a small group of like-minded employees had begun to meet secretly after hours, talking about the changes they wanted to see and what they could do to push back against Eric's authoritarian style. They knew that challenging him head-on would be a mistake, but they weren't about to let him run the company into the ground. Eric, of course, wasn't oblivious. His surveillance of the office had only grown more intense. He watched his employees like a hawk, noticing who arrived early, who left late, who was focused, and who was distracted. He knew that the dissenters were gathering, but rather than confronting them directly, he chose a different approach. He decided that it was time for the final test. One crisp morning, a meeting was called. This time, it was with the senior team, those who had been with the company for years and had witnessed the changes firsthand. As the employees filed into the conference room, they couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another meeting. It was something more, something that would decide the future of the company. Lisa walked in with a group of her allies, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been preparing for this day for weeks, ever since she had decided to confront Eric head-on. The decision to speak out had cost her friendships, trust, and even her standing within the company. But she was done staying silent. It was now or never. Eric was already seated at the head of the table when everyone arrived. He looked as calm as ever, his posture straight, his eyes sharp. There was a quiet, unsettling confidence about him. But Lisa could see it now. This wasn't just a CEO protecting his position. This was a man playing a dangerous game, and he was determined to win. The meeting started as it always did. Eric laid out the agenda in his usual matter-of-fact way. But today, there was something different in his tone. He wasn't just discussing company policies or growth strategies. Today, he was making a statement. "We've made progress," Eric said, his voice low but firm. "But we're not there yet. We need to push harder, dig deeper, and move faster if we want to be at the top. The competition is fierce, and we're still lagging behind in some key areas. But there's something I need to address first. There's been discontent in the ranks, and I'm here to deal with it." The room fell silent. Lisa felt a cold shiver run down her spine. This was it. He knew. Eric looked directly at her, his gaze unblinking. "Lisa, I understand you've had some concerns about the direction I'm taking this company. I'm sure you've been sharing them with your colleagues. Is that correct?" Lisa swallowed hard but stood tall. "Yes, Eric. I have concerns. This company was built on trust and collaboration, but under your leadership, everything has become about control and fear. We can't keep going like this. The culture you're creating is toxic." Eric didn't flinch. "I disagree. What you're calling fear is actually what every successful company needs. It's called discipline. It's called focus. The days of hand-holding and coddling employees are over. The people who aren't willing to work hard won't last, and I'm not here to waste time on those who can't keep up." The tension in the room was palpable. It was clear that both sides were digging in, each unwilling to back down. But Lisa wasn't about to let Eric's cold dismissal go unchecked. "Eric, you don't understand," Lisa said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and frustration. "This company is full of talented people who care, but you're driving them away with your methods. You're turning us against each other, and you don't even see it. We need leadership, not a dictator." Eric's expression hardened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something dark in his eyes. I see exactly what I'm doing, Lisa. I'm doing what needs to be done. If that means some people get left behind, then so be it. But I won't let anyone stand in the way of this company's success. Not you, not anyone. The air in the conference room grew thick with tension. It felt like a standoff, a battle of wills, each person determined to come out on top. Lisa and Eric locked eyes, neither one willing to yield. The room was holding its collective breath, waiting for the next move. Finally, Eric stood up. I've given you all a chance to prove yourselves. But the time for talking is over. From here on out, I expect results. No more excuses. And if anyone has a problem with that, well, you know where the door is. There was a long silence before anyone dared speak. Then, slowly, one by one, the others in the room began to stand, their faces a mix of fear and respect. They knew the stakes. Eric wasn't just the CEO. He was the embodiment of power, and those who defied him would be crushed. The office had never felt so silent. The once bustling hallways were now a ghostly reminder of what the company had once been. The war between Eric and the employees had left its mark, and the question on everyone's mind was clear. Who would win? Eric Stone, for all his ambition and control, had underestimated one thing: the power of unity. In his relentless pursuit of results, he had ignored the very thing that had built the company, the people. Now, as the tension in the office reached its peak, it was clear that Eric's reign was on the brink of collapse. It had been a month since the confrontation in the conference room. Lisa and her group had continued to fight behind the scenes, meeting secretly, organizing, and slowly gaining the trust of more and more employees. They knew they couldn't take Eric down alone. They needed to unite the office against him. It started small, with employees sharing their frustrations during lunch breaks, talking about the changes they wanted to see. Then, as more people began to voice their discontent, the movement grew. Lisa had managed to build a coalition of workers from all departments, each one determined to take back control of the company they had once loved. Eric, for all his intelligence and focus, had failed to see the shift happening around him. He was too caught up in his own game of power and control, too obsessed with being the leader. He thought that by maintaining his distance, by ruling with an iron fist, he could keep everyone in line. But what he didn't understand was that a company wasn't built on just results. It was built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. One afternoon, a final meeting was called. This wasn't just any regular meeting. This was the meeting that would decide the fate of the company. Lisa and her group had planned it for weeks. They knew that if they didn't act now, they might never get another chance. The employees had been instructed to meet in the conference room at 2 p.m., with no indication of what the agenda would be. It was Eric's usual way of keeping control, keeping everyone on edge, not knowing what would come next. But this time, things were different. Lisa walked into the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was filled with employees, but the atmosphere was charged. Everyone knew this was the moment of truth. Eric stood at the head of the table, his usual confident demeanor in place. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease that hadn't been there before. The employees, sensing the shift, remained silent as Eric began the meeting. "I trust you all know why we're here," Eric said, his voice steady but with an edge of impatience. "The company is facing challenges, and we need to address them. I'm here to talk about the future. I'm here to lead us into a new era." But as he spoke, Lisa stood up, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Eric, it's over. The company doesn't belong to you anymore. We've made our decision, and it's time for change." The room fell silent. Eric's face hardened, but Lisa didn't back down. "You've tried to run this company with fear, with control, and it hasn't worked. The people here don't want a dictator. They want a leader who listens, who values them, and who works with them. You've turned us against each other, and you've turned this place into a battleground. That ends now." Eric's expression flickered for a moment, an almost imperceptible shift, but it was enough to let everyone in the room know that Lisa had struck a nerve. He had underestimated her, and he had underestimated the resolve of the employees. Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We've united, Eric. We're done with your methods, your way of ruling with fear. We've come together, and we're taking back this company. We'll rebuild it, together, and we'll do it without you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Eric stared at Lisa, his mind racing. He hadn't prepared for this. He had always prided himself on being in control, on being the one who called the shots. But now, for the first time, he felt the ground slipping from under him. "You think you can just take over?" Eric said, his voice low but filled with disbelief. "You think you can do better? This company would collapse without me. I'm the one who turned it around. I'm the one who saved it." Lisa shook her head. "No, Eric, you didn't save it. You almost destroyed it. And now we're taking it back." There was a long silence as the room watched the two of them. Eric, the once confident CEO, and Lisa, the employee who had taken a stand. It was a battle of wills, and there could only be one winner. Finally, Eric spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You think you can just push me out? You think this is the end? I'm the one with the power here. I'm the one who built this company." Lisa didn't flinch, "And now we're going to build it again. Without you." The meeting ended with a sense of finality. Eric's grip on the company had slipped away, and though he tried to salvage his position, it was clear that the battle was lost. Lisa and the employees had won. Eric was out.